we're going to dive into some smaller birds today. Thank you to everyone that came to our birding hike on Saturday. We got to see a northern harrier hawk, so that was really awesome. Our next one is on January 3rd, so it'll be after the class is over, technically. That'll be at 9:30 a.m. at Kelly Nature Preserve. And I'll send out a reminder email about that beforehand. And that is a great place to see a lot of the birds that we're going to be talking about this week and next week. I usually see a lot of smaller birds at Kelly. So our tool highlight for the week is the technology that can be used with birding. So there's a lot of really cool technology out there. One of the main ones is a couple of the main ones are run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is one of the biggest sources of bird information and research and all of that in North America and even worldwide. They're a really, really cool resource. So they run eBird, which is a website and an app. And it's a way to log sightings. It's a community science tool. So one of those uses for eBird, if you're trying to find a specific species, like in this search, they're looking for eastern whippoorwills, it'll show you by like color where they've been sighted and how often. So it'll get darker the more often they're seen there. So obviously whippoorwills not seen super often on this map, but you can also use eBird as you're hiking as a form of community science. So as you're going, you'll start a hike and then log the distance that you, like where you are, the distance that you walk, and then log each species that you see. And eBird it's awesome. You can keep local lists, worldwide lists. You can keep, you can kind of keep your life list on there. It's a really cool tool for birders. You can also use the Merlin app because eBird can be a little bit intimidating. They want a lot of information. But Merlin is a free app for your phone, and it will actually listen to the birds around. So you can hit like sound record as you're hiking, and it'll pick up the bird sounds and identify them. And it is pretty accurate. It's not 100% accurate, so I recommend like verifying, and you can like hear where it's popped up. Oh, I'm hearing yellow-throated warbler. You can actually click on that, listen to the sound, and then say, okay, yeah, that's what I'm hearing, or no, that's not. So you can actually verify within that app. But it's really useful as far as kind of getting onto the right track of what you're hearing. It also will, you can use it to, again, as a form of community science. So if you are logged into Merlin and to eBird with the same email address, if you use the same account for both, they'll automatically communicate. And so you'll end up going onto eBird and being like, oh, yeah, there's all the sightings that I've seen while I'm using Merlin, which is really fun. It's kind of a lighter version of community science. It also sometimes I'll tend to use it while I'm doing bird counts and just have it running, because sometimes it'll hear a bird before I do. And so I can like, oh, it's saying it's hearing a ruby-crowned kinglet. Let me stop and listen and see if I either hear or see that bird. So I wouldn't use it as 100% accurate. I definitely would verify because it's doing the best it can, but definitely like double check that. And then you can also use iNaturalist is another really cool piece of technology. And that one, it's very similar to eBird, where you can take a picture and it'll give you a guess as far as identification. And then you can actually upload it, and the community will be able to see that and be like, yeah, I agree with you. That's what that is. Or no, actually, I think it might be this. I've had people get into fights over over identifying plants. It's very funny to me. But that one is not just bird specific. It's plants, mushrooms, mammals, all the things. But yeah, there's some really, really cool and useful technology out there for birding and for science. Today we're going to be focusing on backyard or feeder birds. So all of these are birds that if you are looking around your neighborhood or you go on a hike, you are fairly likely to see these. Some of them we'll touch on next week. Some of them are migratory, but we'll cover a lot of these this week. So to start out, we are going to be jumping into woodpeckers. So hairy woodpeckers and downy woodpeckers are they're very similar. Just looking at these photos, they look pretty much like the same bird. You know, there's a couple differences in where the specks are and how many specks, but however, there are some tricks to telling them apart when you're out in the field. So to start, hairy woodpeckers are about twice the size of downy woodpeckers. Hairy woodpeckers are about 9 to 13 inches long. Downies are about 5 to 7 inches long. So downies are more like robin sized or even smaller. I would say they're probably like bluebird sized. So if you see a woodpecker and you're like, wow, that's a tiny woodpecker, it's probably a downy. Hairy woodpeckers are a little bit more like blue jay sized. So hairy woodpeckers, you're likely to see them pretty much anywhere. They like mature forests, but you'll also see them in disturbed areas and like pine and oak woodlands. They are more likely, you're going to see them going up and down the trunk of the tree. They also have been seen following pileated woodpeckers around. So pileateds are really big. We'll get to them in just a second. And they're pretty good at getting into the trees. So hairies tend to just kind of follow behind them and pick up whatever bugs they may have missed. So if you see a pileated woodpecker, hang around for a second after it flies off. You might see a couple hairy woodpeckers coming in behind it. Downy woodpeckers, like I said, they are tiny. They are likely to be seen in open woodlands. In the winter, you'll often see them in feeding flocks with like titmice and chickadees and all kinds of other birds. So they do tend to kind of group up because again, they're a little bird, safety in numbers. The males tend to be feeding on like small branches and weed stems. They do tend to hog the good spots and actively push the females away from the best bug spots. So you're likely to see the females on large branches or trunks, which being a smaller bird is a little bit harder to get to the bugs. So, you know, males they're a little bit of a hog when it comes to the when it comes to finding bugs. Some of our more showy woodpeckers, so pileated woodpeckers, I mean, think woody woodpecker, like that's who he is. They are big. They're about 15 to 20 inches long, so almost 2 feet, about 1.5 foot to 2 feet. The male has a red cheek stripe. The female does not, so you can actually tell the male from the female. They tend to drill rectangular shaped holes in the tree. So if you have a snag or a dying tree in your area and you see kind of a rectangle shape, you probably have some pileateds hanging around. They also are pretty loud when they drum. They do need to have large standing dead trees. So that is an important note as far as like woodland management. A lot of times we'll get questions from people like, you know, why don't you, that tree's dead, why don't you take it down? But if a tree doesn't pose any risk or any danger to either falling on a trail or falling on a structure, I definitely recommend that you leave it up because that all of those bugs in there that are working to break down that tree are really good food for that pileated woodpecker. So if you don't have big standing dead trees in your forest, you're probably not going to get pileated woodpeckers. Which an important note when it comes to woodpeckers, a lot of times people will get them drumming on their house. And it doesn't mean that you have pests in your house. A lot of the smaller woodpeckers drum as a form of communication. And if they drum on something that makes more noise, they sound like a bigger woodpecker. So if you have like metal siding or anything like that, or drain pipes, you'll probably get a little, downy or hairy woodpecker trying to just sound like they are a bigger woodpecker than they actually are. Red-headed woodpeckers are very flashy, very beautiful. The male has that bright red head. The female is that's the juvenile, not the female, my bad. But they don't reach that full resplendent color until their second season. So you might even see a juvenile red-headed woodpecker that is a little bit duller, has just a little red cheek patch. These are about 7 to 9 inches long, so somewhere in between a downy and a hairy woodpecker as far as size. They are known to catch insects while flying, so they will actually go on the wing and hunt, and they'll forage on the ground as well. They're not just going on the trees. And you are likely to see them because they like to catch things on the wing, you're more likely to see them in forests that have large open understories, as well as in wetlands. So unfortunately, with all of the invasive plants that we have, with invasive bush honeysuckle and privet and calorie pear and all the things that kind of crowd up our understories, it's made red-headed woodpeckers a little bit less likely to see because they need those open areas. They need a good amount of space to be able to fly through and catch bugs. Northern flickers are also a woodpecker, even though they don't have it in their name. These guys are about 10 to 12 inches long, so they are a little bigger. In the west, they will actually have red shafts on their wings, but in the east, they are yellow shafted. And even if you find a northern flicker feather, it's bright yellow on the underside. They're really pretty. You're more likely to see them perched kind of on top of a horizontal branch rather than hopping up and down the trunk. And they like to be in kind of the edge where there's trees, but also an open field, open habitat. But they've got that spotty breast, a little bit of red on the back of their head, and the beautiful dark bib that they have. They're a very pretty bird. And then red-bellieds are our final woodpecker that's here year-round. We have one more that visits in the winter. Red-bellied have red on their head, and if you squint closely in the correct light, there's a tiny little bit of blush to their breast. They're not the most aptly named woodpecker, but if they don't have red all over their head, it's a red-bellied and not a red-headed. They're about 8 to 10 inches long, so a little bigger. They don't usually drill into the tree. They are more likely to be seen kind of picking at the surface of the bark. They're pretty common in forests. They're a fairly often seen and heard woodpecker. I'd say I probably see and hear them on like 7 or 8 out of 10 hikes that I go on that I'm paying attention. They have also been seen wedging large nuts into like crevices of the bark, and then they'll whack it into a smaller piece using their beak. So a little bit of tool use there, a little bit of cleverness. And then we have a winter visitor. It's our yellow-bellied sapsucker. The males have a red throat, females don't. So there's a little bit of sexual dimorphism there. They're about 7 to 9 inches long, so about the same size as a red-headed woodpecker. And we are south to them. They breed up in Canada, and then in the wintertime they come south. They are very easy to see the evidence of. So if you look, you can kind of see in this picture, there's a little bit of a line of holes. So they will drill a line of holes in a tree. They will do pretty much any tree, but they definitely prefer birches and maples. Not only do they lap up the sap from those holes, but they will also eat the bugs. So, sap is sweet, and sweet things attract bugs. And so by the time they finish drilling the line and they're over here, by the time they come back to that first hole, there's usually some bugs in there and they get a nice bug soup. But like I said, these guys are only here in the wintertime, so we should start seeing them around now. All right, sparrows, little brown birds. We have a lot of species of sparrows here. We're going to highlight 6 of them that you're most likely to see. House sparrows are very common, especially in urban areas. They are invasive. They are from Europe, but they don't have as much of a color difference. As far as so breeding males will have this red patch on their head and kind of brighter colors. Non-breeding males or juvenile males tend to look very similar to females with this kind of duller brown. But they're a little round bird. You usually see them in parking lots, especially if there's somewhere that serves French fries around and there's French fries to be found in the parking lot. And they are actually completely unrelated to our American sparrows. They're a fully different family of birds. Field sparrows are fairly common. They have this little gray head that has a little red patch on the top, a little red cheek tuft. They also have a pink beak, which is the easiest way to tell them, for me at least, for me to tell them apart from other sparrows, is they have that very nice pink beak, and they also have a white ring around their eye. That's pretty unique to them. They are usually, like most sparrows, they're usually seen in tall grass and brushy areas, especially in thorny shrubs. They really like kind of that protection that provides. But you'll usually see them kind of, if you have anywhere that's brushy or, has taller grasses, there will probably be some sparrows hopping around in there. Song sparrows they're a lot streakier than most sparrows. So they have this brown eye streak going on, and they have a lot of streaks on their breast. They, again, tend to stick to dense, low vegetation, and they like more open, wet areas. So if you have anywhere near a river, pond, wetland, creek, you're more likely to see song sparrows. Tree sparrows were named because they look like the European tree sparrow, not because that they spend time in trees, which I just learned. I'd always thought about okay, you see tree sparrows on the ground. Why are they called tree sparrows? So they have rusty cap, red eye streak, so far fairly similar to the field sparrow, but they have this little dark smudge in the center of their breast, which is the big indicator of them. They also have a little bit of yellow on their beak, rather than that pink beak. They, again, they stay low, so you'll see them shrubs, tall grasses. You're probably not going to see them up in the treetops. And then chipping sparrows they're another one that has that bright red cap, but they have that brown or that black eye streak rather than red. These guys actually even nest pretty low, and apparently they are terrible at building nests. Their nests are very flimsy. You can see a lot of light through them. So if you see kind of a poorly constructed nest in a low shrub, might be a chipping sparrow nest. They just don't really put in a lot of effort, I guess. And then white-throated sparrows, the males have depending on the color morph. Some of them have a little white or a little yellow patch near their beak. All of them have a black crown with white stripes. However, they have a tan morph and a white morph. And both of them will interbreed. So it keeps both that tan stripe and white stripe morph going. And in studies, they found that males tend to prefer females that are the white stripe morph, whereas females tend to prefer males that are the tan stripe morph. And the white stripe morph tends to be a little bit more aggressive. They're a little bolder. So just an interesting little difference as far as, you know, even within the same area, them having those different morphs. They do have that white spot on their throat, no matter what their morph is. So white-throated sparrow, white throat, and they tend to either nest on the ground or near the ground. So sparrows, you're pretty much going to see in the brush. You're not. They are a pretty accessible bird as far as you don't have to, you know, crane your neck to see them. So our corvids, jumping to some bigger birds. Here we have American crows and blue jays, but I had to throw in the raven in there for some comparisons. So American crows are omnivores. They are very, very intelligent. They've been seen in the winter. They will form communal roosts for the night. And these have been seen with like a couple hundred crows to up to like 2 million crows in the same roost. They don't reach sexual maturity until they're between 2 and 4 years old. Some of them will start breeding at 2, but usually they wait till they're about 4. So they have a longer lifespan of bird, more time spent learning. And they're very intelligent. They've been seen using tools. They learn really well. They can recognize things. They can recognize people. They are often considered to be a scavenger, but that's actually a small part of their diet. They don't usually eat carrion. A lot of that's because even though their beak is so big, it's not strong enough to break through most skin. So they can really only eat carrion if another scavenger has already gotten there and kind of opened it up a little bit. Blue jays are very common here. They, you know, beautiful little blue bird. They are also very intelligent. They're good at mimicking, or especially around here, I most often hear blue jays mimicking red-tailed and red-shouldered hawks. And they also are really good at alerting you to the presence of the hawk. They're part of the alarm system of the forest. And so if you hear a bunch of blue jays, keep an eye out. There's probably a hawk or some other kind of predator around. Some of them migrate, sometimes. They will, like, their migration habits are too random to find a pattern. They tried to, you know, say, okay, well, young blue jays will migrate, but then some young blue jays migrated one year and then not the other year. Some mature ones will still migrate, but again, see, even within the same individual, sometimes they go south, sometimes they go further north, sometimes they stay put. It really just seems to be what they feel like at the time. One of the common myths I hear with blue jays, it's not quite a myth, but it doesn't happen as often as we think. A lot of people say that blue jays will raid other birds' nests and eat their eggs. But there was an extensive study done on blue jays and their feeding habits. And throughout that study, they found only 1% of jays had evidence of eggs or birds in their stomachs. So it's a very few blue jays that will actually raid nests. They do sometimes, but again, it's not every blue jay is out there eating baby birds. Mostly they eat nuts and insects. And then they have this beautiful black kind of bridle striping on their face and their necks. That is actually unique to the individual, and is potentially a way that they can tell each other apart. So we actually think that they can identify their individuals. They have very complex family structures. They tend to stick around with their family. They're very tight. They're a neat little bird. And then common ravens, you will find them across the northern hemisphere. They're not really there. I couldn't find any reports of them in eastern Ohio or in western Ohio. They are occasionally seen in eastern and northern Ohio. And then if you go, anywhere east or northeast of here, they are pretty common. They are considered to be among the smartest of birds. They learn how to use tools. They can recognize people. They can mimic. If you ever see a raven that's been in human care, they actually can mimic words, which is really wild to hear and think about. They also have been seen to recognize cause and effect. So a study in Wyoming found that they learned when hunting season was and learned that the sound of gunshots usually means that there's carrion around. And so they found that during hunting season, the sound of gunshots will actually bring in ravens because they're like, ooh, food. And one of the best ways to tell them apart from crows is the size. If you see, I always hear, like, if you see, a blackbird and you're like, that is the biggest bird I've ever seen, it's a raven. They're pretty huge. They also are very fancy flyers. So they'll do barrel rolls, loop-to-loops. One bird was seen flying upside down for about half a mile. I don't know if that was for fun or for a reason, but crows just kind of fly straight. Think as the crow flies. They're not really fancy. And young ravens have been seen playing games with sticks, where they'll drop the stick and then go catch it, and then drop it again and then go catch it. So getting into some of the others, northern cardinals, everyone pretty much knows how to identify a cardinal. Beautiful little red bird, sticks around all year, has that a brown female with that orange beak. Female cardinals sing as well as the males, and sometimes they'll even sing while they're on the nest. They have one of my favorite scientific names because it's just, hey, it's a cardinal and also a cardinal. That's a cardinal. They are very much known for getting a lot of hormonal aggression. In the springtime, they will attack their own reflection. We have one here at our office every spring who spends a few weeks attacking his reflection in the windows. And we have bird safe glass. He should know that it's not another bird, but usually once their hormones kind of die down, they stop. But you might have a angry cardinal who attacks himself in the window every spring. They are the state bird of 7 states, including Ohio and Kentucky. They're a pretty beloved bird. And the eastern bluebirds, again, another one that has a pretty straightforward scientific name, very repetitive. Males are this beautiful bright blue, and they stay pretty bright throughout the year. They're a little bit duller at this time of year, but they are still pretty recognizable as bluebird. Females are mostly brown. Then they have a little bit of blue on their wings and on their tail feathers. They are really, really good at catching insects. So they will eat bugs on the wing. The male, so they're cavity nesters. If you put up boxes, you're likely to get bluebirds. And we actually have bluebird boxes that if you are interested in helping us out with some community science, we have a bluebird monitoring project that we do every spring through fall. But the male will do a display at the cavity that he's found. They don't build their own cavities. They just go for, something that maybe a woodpecker drilled out or something like that. He'll kind of fly in and out of it. He'll bob his tail up and down. He might put a couple sticks or a couple bits of grass in there. And then once he attracts a female, she builds the nest. He doesn't really help build the nest. They usually will have more than one brood per year. So you usually get a couple rounds of bluebirds throughout the season. And even though they mostly eat bugs, they have sometimes been seen hunting salamanders, lizards, shrews, even snakes. So they're a little bold sometimes. Dark-eyed juncos are a winter visitor here. They are actually a sparrow. They're in the sparrow family, but the male has this dark body. I mean, they're called dark-eyed for a reason. You can't even see his eyes here. And with that white belly. And then the female is pretty much mostly brown, but very iconic little shape to them. They're just a little round bird. They are estimated to be one of the most common birds across North America. One of the most recent population estimates was about 630 million birds. So there's a lot of them out there. They're super cute. You usually see them kind of hopping around. Tufted titmouses or titmice, depending on what you want to call them, are here year-round. They're this cute little gray bird. They have a little crest. You can kind of see it on the thigh. Doesn't have it fully up, but they've got a little feather crest on top of their head that they'll flip up when they're communicating with each other when they're excited. Males and females look pretty much the same. They don't usually flock together unless it's breeding season. So outside of the spring, you're probably only going to see one or two at a time. They are known to hoard food in the wintertime. So if you get them visiting your feeder, you might see them coming and carrying food away, and they'll kind of stash it. They are cavity nesters, and they are bold little birds. They like to use fur to line their nests, and they have absolutely no problem getting that fur from a live bobcat, opossum, raccoon. Like, they're known to go and just pluck fur off of a potential predator and get away with it. Carolina chickadees. These are, I am very, very thankful that we are not in an area where they overlap with black-capped chickadees. They look almost identical, and they hybridize a lot when they overlap. But thankfully, black-capped chickadees are a little bit further north of here. So if you see a little bird with a black cap and a white face, it's a Carolina chickadee. In winter, they all form flocks of 2 to 8 birds, and they stay within that flock throughout the winter. There are flock switchers who will maybe, like, sometimes halfway through the season will switch flocks. But while they are within that flock, they are very protective of that flock. They'll chase off other birds. They are very tight-knit when they're in that flock. They have sometimes been seen returning to the same mate for a few seasons in a row. Not always, but it does happen sometimes. Usually you'll see these guys way up high. So these are ones you usually have to kind of break out the binoculars and look up towards the top of the branches. But they are a pretty common feeder bird to see. And then we have our Carolina wren. This guy I always remember is little bird, big voice. They are very loud. And they're usually kind of the loudest bird in the woods. They have a brown head, that tan eye streak above their eye, tan breast. There was one captive male wren who they counted him for a day, and he sang nearly 3,000 times in one day. He had a lot to say. They're very chatty, they're very noisy. They do often mate for life. So usually when they find a mate, they will stick with that mate for season after season, which is pretty cool. But they are a pretty small bird, usually, again, up towards the top of the trees. And I usually hear them rather than see them. We have a couple finches. So we have house finches that are actually native to the Western North America. Um, they were introduced to Eastern North America in the 1940s, actually on Long Island. There was a group of people who decided to try to sell Hollywood finches as pets and was not successful. So then they just released them. And now they're everywhere. So the males have that red all over their head and their breast. Females are fully brown. They get that red coloring from pigments in food, so they actually don't develop that red until they're a little bit older. And they only eat plants and seeds. So they actually won't even feed their chicks bugs or any form of protein like that, which is pretty unusual for birds. But they are unfortunately invasive. They are outcompeting our native purple finch. So purple finches were described by Roger Peterson as a sparrow dipped in raspberry juice because they have red all over their body. Like I said, they are being outcompeted by house finches. They're a lot less common to be seen. They found that in encounters, 95% of the time, the purple finch is overcome by the house finch. So, we're losing them. They're not as common to be seen. They actually are known to be mimics. They will, as they're doing their song, they will add in songs of barn swallows, goldfinches, etc. And they are seed eaters. Now, unfortunately, they are not also seed dispersers. They kind of completely destroy the seed in eating it. So usually when a purple finch gets a hold of a seed, that's it. That seed's not going to be spread anywhere. White-breasted nuthatches are similar to woodpeckers in that they will hop up and down a tree. They have that very crisp, clean, black, white, gray markings on their body. They are known to, they get that name because they've been seen jamming large nuts into tree bark, and then they'll whack at it to, quote, hatch out the seed within. Usually we'll see them on deciduous trees along main branches, kind of go hopping up and down. They will join foraging flocks with titmice and chickadees in the wintertime. They're also one that stores seeds. So they like to kind of build up their cache of seeds. Grackles are a really pretty bird, and I think in my opinion, an often overlooked bird. So they look black from a distance. They're about the same size as a mourning dove. And they'll look totally black from a distance, but when you get up close to them, they have this beautiful iridescence on their feathers. The females aren't as glossy as males, so they don't have quite as much iridescence, but the males are absolutely gorgeous. You'll often see them in flocks with starlings. So when you see, a huge flock of blackbirds, it's usually a mix of starlings and grackles. They are omnivores. They eat seeds. They've been seen pulling like leeches and things off of the legs of turtles. They'll catch invertebrates. They'll catch mice. They also have been seen actually hunting adult birds that are smaller than them. So they're pretty opportunistic. They do a behavior that a few other birds do called anting, where you might see them kind of laying on the ground with their feathers or with their wings spread out, letting ants crawl all over them. So the ants actually secrete a type of acid that helps to remove and prevent parasites in the bird's feathers. So they also can use like walnut juice, any like citrus. They've actually been seen using mothballs in a similar way. They'll kind of like flop around in mothballs. But yeah, they have a very unique way of ridding themselves of parasites. All right, so our birding spot of the week is Kelly Nature Preserve. That's up in Loveland, Ohio. It's where we'll be going for our next Intro to Birding hike, if you'd like to join. It's about 42 acres along the Little Miami River. It's got meadow, forest, and river habitats. So a lot of different spots for birds to be. And as of December 2025, there's been 168 species logged on eBird at Kelly. So it's a great spot to visit, good spot for warblers in the springtime. And it's a nice, easy half a day hike. It's also, if you're into kayaking, it's a great spot to launch your kayak or to take out. From what I hear, a lot of people will go from Lake Isabella to Kelly Nature Preserve. And it's about like a 2-3 hour trip. You can see some cool birds there. It's also a great spot for hearing a great horned owl. There is a great horned owl that lives across the Little Miami River. And I've heard him pretty consistently when I'm there in the evenings. So my graphic is not showing up here, but a great way to be a bird friend is to not use pesticides. So you may have heard a lot, talk about don't use a rodenticide because that affects raptors. So when any sort of animal, whether it's a bug or a mouse or a rat, ingests a poison, that poison stays in their body. And then whatever eats them also gets poisoned. So just recently I saw a video of a red-shouldered hawk that had come into a rehabber that had eaten a rat that was poisoned, and it completely removed its blood's ability to clot, and it passed away within 24 hours of coming to that rehabilitator. So whether you're using a chemical to kill bugs, whether it's rodenticide, anything like that, it really impacts those birds or any wildlife that might eat that dead insect or rat or whatever. A 2025 study in Science of the Total Environment showed that pesticide residues in bird nests correlates with a higher number of dead offspring and unhatched eggs. And it also causes those offsprings to be more likely to die before reaching maturity. One of the big, kind of flagship conservation stories is of bald eagles with DDT. And with the banning of DDT, they have come back. What was happening was that the bald eagles were ingesting, any sort of prey items that had kind of taken in DDT, and it was causing their eggs to be very thin and brittle, and so the eggs would break before the chicks could hatch. So if you have any sort of, if you got a mouse in the house or anything like that, consider using traps or other non-poison methods of removing that. All right, well, with that, do we have any questions? And you can put those in the chat. I already see there's a fun woodpecker article that I'm going to have to read after this. But next week we'll dive into some more migratory birds. So both summer visitors and winter visitors, and kind of dive into those occasional sightings. I'll give a minute for any questions to pop up in the chat. Yeah, like I said, we have our Christmas bird count is on Thursday morning. It's not supposed to rain in the morning, it looks like right now. It's supposed to hold off till the afternoon. But we'll have a team at Grailville Nature Preserve in Loveland and the team at Catherine Stagmar Park, which is in Goshen. You can find the information for that on our website if you're interested in joining. I'll bring some hot chocolate and coffee to start us off with. It's going to be a little bit warmer that morning, which is pretty nice considering the cold snap we've had. And we'll just kind of hike around for a couple hours and see what birds we see. We're going to have some pretty experienced birders with us, so it'll be nice to glean or to mooch off of their information and their knowledge. The hike at Kelly is January 3rd, so the first Saturday in the new year at 9:30. And again, I'll send out a reminder email probably the week before for that, just so that, you know, you get a little update and a little reminder. And they'll be at 9:30 a.m. I will say, quick note with Kelly Nature Preserve, because it's a nature preserve, we don't have bathroom structures there. So there is a porta potty, which can be more or less pleasant in the wintertime. So just a planning note for visiting Kelly. But it's a really cool little nature preserve. It's one of my favorite parks that we have, and it's one I unfortunately don't get to as often as I would like to. So I like scheduling hikes there because it makes me go there.